Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. We got a health update on Jarred Vanderbilt on Wednesday, and is it prove it time for the Lakers? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always going to be free, never behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 26,000 subscribers to the show, Andy, all of whom are wondering, still wondering and hoping and wondering when Jarred Vanderbilt might play again. The answer is, Lakers gave an update Wednesday at practice. This from Mike Trudell, of course, covers the Lakers, travels with the team for Spectrum Sportsnet. Jarred Vanderbilt's rehabilitation will continue for the next couple of weeks before the next update. He's been ramping up activity, but the progression has been more gradual than the team anticipated. They'll be patient as his body builds up. There have been no setbacks, but initial expectations have been adjusted, and they want to keep the long term in mind. Basically, he's not healing as fast as we would like, and there's not much we can do about it. We'll touch base again in a month.
They've been clearly exercising a lot of caution with this. My hope initially had been that they were just exercising caution as he would get back sooner than expected. As it turns out, he is at minimum not responding as quickly as they hoped it would be. You and I were debating a lot offline before the show about the way the team has handled Vando's injury from a PR perspective. I want to make this clear. Like Brian and I, we talked about this in a recent show. I would be lying if I said I had full faith in the Lakers training staff simply because they've had too many guys over the last 3 or 4 years that have taken not just longer than we, Brian and I, Laker fans, whoever, have expected getting back on the court. They have taken longer than it seems like the Lakers have expected to get back on the court.
Yeah, for me, the evidence that, of not having a ton of faith in the training and medical staff and all these other things, they keep changing the training and medical over the last 3 or 4 years. 5 years, it's happened a few times, and so. But that's nothing is the basis,
right? But Brian and I cannot specifically point to something that has been mishandled because we frankly have no idea what we're talking about along those lines. I do think though that when it comes to just the handling of information and even setting of expectations and understanding with Vando, this has been a long process of confusion generated on their end, or confusion allowed to be generated, beginning from Game 5 of last year's playoffs against Denver, where Vando was active. Even if he was active purely as a smokescreen, unless they tell us, hey, fellas, hell of a smokescreen, huh? We have to assume that he is at least somewhat physically capable of stepping on the court.
No, we don't, but I understand we do.
Right.
I get you right. I understand what you're saying.
Right.
I didn't buy it then. I don't buy it now.
Whatever. But there is at least a reasonable expectation that even until it is a smokescreen, there's at least a reasonable expectation.
They should have at some point over the summer after the playoffs. They didn't do exit interviews. And it's like little stuff like this is, I think,
it all adds up. And then,
somebody should have let it leak. Like, oh yeah, that was just games.
Right. And then, late September, early October rolls around and it turns out, oh yeah, by the way, Vando had off-season double foot surgery. Just in case you didn't hear, because we didn't let anybody know, that happened. But they still, Rob Pelinka allowed for the implication, I think, one that, by the way, you and I were both highly skeptical about, but the implication that Vando could be, if not available opening night, pretty damn close to opening night. And then,
right. I think but it's like, I don't think, let me rephrase. I would like to think that they're not so stupid as to knowingly say that we think Jarred Vanderbilt might be available around opening night, give or take, knowing that he wouldn't be. Like, I think this team makes mistakes periodically. I don't think they're that stupid. I think they thought, more or less, or were optimistic or somewhat hopeful that if he wasn't there on opening night, 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, something like that, he'd be available near the beginning of the season. They were wrong, and that gets to what's complicated about the correct answer for something like this is we have no idea when he's going to be able to play, because the demands of being able to be cleared to play NBA basketball and stay on the floor without re-injuring yourself are light years higher than like normal return to like for people who have surgeries. So
surgery, by the way, that we don't even know specifically what the surgery was. We just were told foot surgery.
Right, for a guy who's had foot issues going back a ways. Like,
right,
this
we don't know. They could have been cosmetic for all we know. Like, we know like for Jarred Vanderbilt's OnlyFans page, like, which I want to make clear, to the best of my knowledge, does not exist.
But appear to be some sort of fetishist, is what Andy is trying to
look somewhere else other than Vando.
Actually,
that's not how he rolls.
Basketball players tend to have the most disgusting feet because of like have you ever seen like LeBron's feet? Like, they are gnarly and grizzled, and
Kobe's were a wreck.
Yeah, I mean, they were awful because of what these guys are doing on a night in and night out basis, despite having fantastic shoes. Yeah. So
you gotta have a real type to go to their OnlyFans page for feet.
It's like,
not that there's anything wrong with it.
No, and there's a lid for every pot. I'm just saying, I mean, like, you don't like regular feet, you like feet that have lived, so to speak. Yeah. The correct answer, the only answer that they can give that I think is fairly honest is, we don't know when he's going to play, and we'll let you know when you see him is when he's able to play. That is not, I think, a particularly satisfactory answer to anybody. And compare it.
But at least it's communicated.
It's fine. And it's the difference between like the Jackson Hayes got an update today that on Wednesday.
A couple days ago.
I thought it was Wednesday. I guess it was Tuesday. That things are progressing. He's back, doing stuff, and should be back pretty soon. Like, he had just like a sprained ankle, basically. Mm-hmm. And like, that's an easy one. Like, okay, he's on the floor, he's doing things. Like, how do you respond today at practice? No swelling. All right, great, we're back. The difference between these two injuries is pretty stark, and they kind of, Jackson Hayes will be updated in 1 to 2 weeks. We'll let you know he was kind of updated in 1 to 2 weeks. They have this track record, though, whether it's bad luck, bad management, or a combination of the two, with the Gabe Vincent injury, which was longer than, and I think more problematic than they anticipated. Whether, go back to the Kendrick Nunn injury, which I think was pretty similar to the Vincent one, if I remember correctly. Like, just like this sort of thing, like, it's just never come back. Once you have that happen to you a few times, again, whether it's the staff's fault or not, people, in my opinion at least, are not going to be really accepting of any updates or anything other than, there's my player on the floor, he's back and playing. Everything else, to some degree, is going to sound like you're lying or you're trying to shield it. I'm not saying that more information would be, I think, helpful to them.
I'm not talking about the way to make Laker fans happier. I'm talking about the way you can do a better job of controlling your own communication, controlling your own information, controlling your own specificity. For example, letting people know in a timely manner when Jarred Vanderbilt had his surgery, as opposed to an aside. Yeah. And then, if this is taking longer than expected, I would be more proactive with the updates. I would give a little more explanation about what's going on. Will it make people happy? No. But if nothing else, I think specificity can at least on some level double for competence. And when you aren't getting your players back and you're not communicating what's going on well, and if we're being honest, a lot of fans don't have a lot of faith in the way this organization is run in the first place. Taken individually, these things may not matter a lot. Taken collectively, they get much, much worse.
Yeah, and I think the tricky part, and when we get after the break, I want to get deeper into what actually this means, practically speaking, for like if/when the Lakers might get Vanderbilt back on the floor and what he could look like if they do, because that's the other part of it. There's when the answer sort of is, he could be back anywhere between, a month and a year. It's a really tricky place to be, because what you don't want to do, and this is why teams, the Lakers, and really teams across sports have tried really hard to now avoid putting timelines on anything. And they used to be like, 3 weeks. Then it used to be, they realized that was a problem, so they went like 3 to 8. 3 to 12, and that was problematic. You don't want to put a player in a position where it seems like they're the one doing the wrong thing. So what kind of Vanderbilt are they going to get when Vanderbilt finally returns? That's next.
Locked on Lakers brought to you by Game Time, the best concert I've ever seen in my life. George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic, 1992, the Palladium in Hollywood. They played for 5 hours without a break. The show I've been trying to chase to see if it could be topped. There's been a few that have come close. Prince at the Forum really stood out. John Lee Hooker at the House of Blues. But as I keep chasing that next best concert, I'm going to be using Game Time, because they make getting tickets easier with features like Game Time Picks that filters out confusing details and just lets you know great deals, great seats, saving you time. Panoramic seat views before you buy. So exactly what everything is going to look like, the ambiance, all of it. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. What time is it? Game time.
The big question to me, Andy, becomes, let's say, it's a month, and I think that's probably optimistic, a month before Vanderbilt is, back on the floor. We'll call it January 1st, which also may be optimistic. What I think, people have to understand is, go back to last year. His first return from injury, he was not good. And then he was hurt again, and it was the second time he came back.
Which could, in theory, be why they are exercising some degree of caution, because they're just like, sure, we want him to be fully, truly back as much as we can realistically sense. So sure, once he's back, he's back.
At this point, though, were I Rob Pelinka, I would just assume he's not going to play. I would assume that you have a Kendrick Nunn situation, that you have a Vincent situation from last year where, Vincent came back, but he was sort of fundamentally unplayable when he did. I think you have to proceed as if Jarred Vanderbilt is not going to be a player who takes the floor for you this season. And then be happy and surprised if he does. Because, if you are Rob, you have to think about personnel. You have to think about trades. You have to think, December 15th is coming up. That, opens up a lot of your options for what's there. And the decisions you make would be different if you thought, we're really confident player X is coming back by mid-January, versus we have no flipping clue when player X is coming back.
Honestly, I'm not sure they're that much different, because to me, the number one thing this team needs is more capable, versatile wing defenders. And I think that would be the case whether Jarred Vanderbilt you felt strongly would be available or not, because Cam Reddish and Max Christie, the two guys right now filling that role, neither one of them is fully proven for full seasons, much less as playoff options. Mm-hmm. So if you're thinking about this along the lines of what you would need in the playoffs, in certain respects, I'm not sure it makes a difference other than it might make it more urgent.
Here's the thing. The team is 10-4. And so this equation, and we'll in the next.
But they're 10-4 while still very clearly needing defensive upgrades. So
right, but again, do you need one? Do you need two? Do you need who do you go whether or not Vanderbilt's available is a. I refuse to believe. I understand your point that you're making that they probably need more than one. That ideally you can shore things up there, but I refuse to believe that the equation doesn't change at all if you factor Vanderbilt available versus
it doesn't. I guess it doesn't to me, because it's what I'd be looking for anyway. If I thought Vanderbilt was going to be healthy, I would consider it urgent anyway. So to me, whether
at the exact same level versus if he's not there at all,
yes, yeah, because I think the team. Have you watched this team play defense?
Right,
they need a lot of help.
And one of the guys that they were hoping to deliver that help is Jarred Vanderbilt,
but he can't do it all.
If he can't do it, then you need. Then if you thought they needed the help with Vanderbilt, they need twice as much help without him.
But I can't make him. I can't make that position higher than number one on my priority list. Like if I make it 0.5, that doesn't symbolize anything. Right, and they only have so many assets that they can move anyway. They can probably make 2 notable trades tops. So again, if I consider this a priority with or without Vando, and I considered it a pretty urgent priority with or without Vando, for me, it doesn't really change the calculus. It was going to be the same for me.
Okay. But I mean, there's the need for a backup big. I'm saying you have to start making choices.
Well, I've already made it clear. I don't think the backup big thing is that high a priority for me. I don't. Okay. I mean,
one of the things, the other part of this is, that at 10-4, it's kind of a prove it stretch of the schedule. We touched on this a tiny bit on Wednesday's show, but you start in tonight's game, the next 5 for the Lakers will address some of the complaints that they haven't played and beaten good teams. And again, starting tonight with a Magic team that has played very well of late, despite missing Paolo Banchero.
Wendell Carter Jr. might actually be out too. He was unavailable for Wednesday's game against the Clippers, and it's worth noting the Magic will be on the second end of a back-to-back, while the Lakers will have had a day of rest. So that's good to know. After Orlando, they see Denver, who could theoretically have Nikola Jokic back. I don't think Aaron Gordon will be back regardless. From there, you face Phoenix that, given the original timeline that was offered by the Suns, KD could be back, but it's not a given.
I'd be very surprised if Durant played in that game.
Right. And then the Spurs follow. I would expect Wembanyama and Devin Vassell to be back by then, because they're currently considered day by day.
Although Vassell was already, maybe Vassell was already called out for tonight's game. He was declared out for tonight's game on Wednesday. So maybe we're not in such a prove-it stretch for the Lakers. And maybe this is an opportunity just to keep piling up wins, this time against Western Conference rivals, and then we can just keep discussing whether or not the Lakers are actually good or if they're just super-duper lucky.
Yeah, I mean, look, even the next game against the Thunder, obviously there's going to be no Chet, but Isaiah Hartenstein has actually
played on Wednesday.
Yeah. Right, he's actually been made active. Jalen Williams could be back by then, which, if nothing else, matters for the Thunder's handling of AD. And then you get a bit of a break against
the other
Jazz.
Jalen Williams, by the way, is playing incredibly well. Yes, that dude has arrived.
Yes, he has. Then you get a bit of a break with the Jazz, but then you take on the Timberwolves on the road. So is it as tough of a stretch as it would be with all these teams at full strength? No, but as we just discussed for the last segment and 3 quarters, neither are the Lakers.
I would say this. I am perfectly happy to put off finding out how good the team actually is while they, say get to 10 or 11 games over 500.
Hell
like
yeah.
I am happy to be like, are they that good? Don't know, but they have a really good record, and it's going to come in handy over the course of the rest of the year. So if we need to delay this conversation a little bit, it's fine with me.
You don't get 2 wins for beating a really good team. You get
Nope.
1 win.
Yep. So we'll see what they do. It starts tonight against the Magic. If they can beat an Orlando team that has played very well, that would be a good sign. Of course, the Lakers have been an excellent home team, so you would expect a pretty good effort. There's been a lot of happy discussion, Andy, about Dalton Connect and where exactly he fits in the like pantheon of shooters for the Lakers. Like, when was the last time the Lakers had a shooter that worked? Like, where like this was, and like, has it been since they took belts off of uniforms, or like they weren't made out of satin anymore? We're not really sure. And fans of the team, listeners to the show, have been leaving a lot of questions and suggestions. You have done the research, Andy, to try to figure out when exactly the Lakers last had a guy like Connect, despite tremendous effort in this space. And we will get to this list next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Chime. Take control of your finances by using a Chime checking account with features like no maintenance fees, fee-free overdraft up to $200, and getting paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. Here's how it works. Set up a direct deposit in your Chime account. After a qualifying direct deposit of $200 plus, Chime will notify you to enroll in SpotMe. And with an activated debit card, Chime will spot you up to $200 when you exceed your balance. Your next direct deposit is applied to your negative balance. Chime never charges fees or interest for using SpotMe. Make your fall finances a little greener by working towards your financial goals with Chime. Open your account in 2 minutes at chime.com/NBA. That's chime.com/NBA. Chime feels like progress. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank NA or Stride Bank NA, members FDIC. SpotMe eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Boosts are available to eligible Chime members enrolled in SpotMe and are subject to monthly limits. Terms and conditions apply. Go to chime.com/disclosures for details.
So most fans have seen that meme of that dude in the Cleveland Browns jersey where like the back, instead of just like one name, it's every quarterback they've had in like the last like 8 years, and it's like 36 names crammed onto the back of a jersey.
Really sad.
It is, and there's something similar that's been going on with the Lakers in their quest to find shooting. And they have imported shooters, they've signed shooters, they've done a lot of things to try to improve the shooting, and yet we have never, in my experience, as far as I can tell, in the time that we've covered the team, had a guy, I will say, that fits the profile of a Dalton Connect. You, though, actually dug into the record books here to try to figure out just how extensive this search actually has been.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, you in particular have raised this question a lot. Like, we've been debating some about, like Dalton Connect comps and things like that. And I really started thinking about, like, okay, where are the guys that actually, like, who are the guys that were at least supposed to play this role or theoretically sort of did it, and like how close or whatever, like who are the people in line for this? I started actually thinking about it. And one guy that I just right off the bat, I do want to give some props to, that I think deserves a little more respect along these lines, is actually D'Angelo Russell, who did set a franchise record for threes last season at 40+% from behind the arc and at high volume. And, he has also hit 9 threes in a game. We saw many games last year where his three-point shooting swung a game for the Lakers. Like, D'Lo at his best is up there with like Steph and these other guys in terms of they are capable of getting on heaters, like true heaters. And D'Lo has done it on enough occasions that even though
I'm not sure D'Lo is quite at the Steph heater level, but I get what you're saying.
I mean, D'Lo has multiple games with like 8 or 9 threes.
Sure, I'm just saying Steph heaters are unique.
No,
but I don't want to argue that point.
No, what separates Steph and D'Lo is that Steph can do it every game.
That's true. What I think where I think it's different is that the way those guys are used, whether you're Steph, JJ Redick, Klay Thompson, Reggie Miller, these guys who are foundationally they're based on shooting first, is like the way they operate in offense is constant motion, running around, doing all these things. And that's just not the way that an offense with D'Angelo Russell works at. It's not his job. Like D'Angelo to me it's
in part because D'Lo's often the guy finding the person.
No question. But when he doesn't have the ball, that's not what he's doing. Steph is also a point guard and is constantly moving.
Sure.
So I mean, it's they're.
But I'm making the connection.
And he doesn't. But I understand what you're doing. And D'Lo doesn't shoot from every spot on the floor, off of every pass, off of everything or whatever that guys like that do. And so that to me is what's different. I am not debating that the dude is a high quality shooter that has elevated, certainly last year, very much elevated the shooting problems that the Lakers had, but he's a different kind of offensive player and shooter. I would not put him in the category of Connect. Not different kind of player.
I think he's closer to Connect, at least in certain ways, than you do. But either way, he deserved, as the guy who just set the record for franchise threes made in a season, he at least deserves some acknowledgement along these lines because he did, in fact, shift a lot of games with his shooting. From there, I just started looking at different names. How we remember ye, Cole Swider and Matt Ryan. Malik Beasley was actually supposed to be Dalton Connect before Connect. He took 7 threes a game for the Lakers, but just at 35%, he was a train wreck defensively. Darvin never really ran stuff for him. Like Beasley also has said later on that there were things happening in his personal life when he was with the Lakers that got in the way, but clearly that didn't work the way the Lakers expected it to. KCP was originally brought in to be, a manna from heaven clutch connection rather than a sniper. But you'd said before that you didn't think KCP is somebody that ends up on a scouting report. I would disagree with that. I also think if you watch,
he gets put on as a scouting report as a guy who you have to cover from 3-point range, but it's just different.
I would say this in a little bit of fairness to KCP. Had he been used more creatively by Frank Vogel, who, all sincere respect, ran very, very uncreative offenses. Like if you look at the difference between how Michael Malone used him versus the way Frank Vogel used him, I think there was at least more possibility with KCP. Laugh at this name if you want to, but he was picked up as a street free agent to basically be Dalton Connect. Ben McLemore, he took nearly 6 threes a game in under 18 minutes as a Laker. Like that is prolific volume.
Those were YOLO teams too. Dude, you could walk on from anywhere and just be like a dude who just does whatever you want.
I'm just following the assignment here. And he shot 37%, which is not bad at all. Unfortunately, he is
pretty good for at least by Lakers standards.
He is nowhere near a good enough overall player, whether compared to Dalton Connect or just compared to NBA players. I mean, like, if you didn't like D'Angelo Russell's defense, like he was prime Gary Payton compared to Ben McLemore. But just as far as profile of shooters, can occupy defense, run all over the place, athletic, he was a model, just a faulty model. Danny Green.
Danny Green qualifies.
Yeah. And took about 5 threes a game, 37%. He was not the athlete that Dalton Connect was. Because do you remember Danny Green's monster putback dunk that everybody on the team was like, wait, Danny Green just did that?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody could believe.
Earlier in his career, Green was much more of one of those guys who ran around and did all that stuff.
Right.
But by the time he got to the Lakers, less so.
I think again, he is not exactly the same player as Dalton Connect, but as far as filling that role and that model, I think
no,
Danny
that's
Green
not a bad
did it.
one.
Mike Muscala, sad face
Mike stretch
emoji.
5, famous stretch 5. Mike Muscala, I think, was there. Brooke Lopez was designed to fill that. Marcus All was again. Like, these are, a little bit different. You don't run Marcus All off of endless screens to try to get him a 3.
He'll throw up if you do that.
they were there to stretch the floor. Same with Moose.
Lou Will was more of a scorer than a shooter, although he took a decent amount of threes, but he was not running off screen, stuff like that. Lou had the ball.
You just call Lou Williams
a lot.
Scorer, Andy.
What you did yes, he was. I still think, in terms of the type of player,
Lou Williams,
I think in terms of the type of player that he was, with versatile ability to score, athleticism combined with shooting, even if Connect is more of a true shooter, I actually think Nick Young is not a bad comp. And he did hit 40% of his threes, 7 per game in his last season with the Lakers. I don't actually think it's a bad comp.
No, but I think as a team, as an opposing coach, if your choice would be like, should we keep Nick Young from running around and shooting 11 or 12 3-pointers a game, or ask Nick Young to run around and shoot 11 to 12 3-pointers a game? The answer is you let him do it.
That's fine.
Because Nick Young's shots, and again, not a kind of the guy that you run off screens and this and that.
Right. And
an isolation style 2-guard scorer, right, in the sort of classic, early 2000s shooting guard thing. Way different player. I don't think
look, some of this was the way they're used. Like Mike D'Antoni was not doing some of that stuff in the same way that JJ Redick is. I mean, we're starting to go back 10 or so years.
Honestly, somebody, because we're getting near the end, but like somebody actually suggested, and I think like in terms of guys who were brought in who had the reputation of a shooter, whose main skill set, like the whole, again, foundational skill set was shooting. They're like Glenn Rice, like going back all the way to him. And
okay. He's on my list.
Well, he was on the list, but I was like, I wonder, like, I had made the Vlad suggestion because, again, same kind of guy.
Yes.
Different eras of 3-point shooting, but like, you kind of, whether you kind of count some of these guys or don't, the fact that we have to be like, do you got to go back to Glenn Rice or Vladimir Radmanovich before you find one of these guys, gives you an indication of how hard, like similar, like, remember how like they had like 12 years where they just never had a real point guard? Mm-hmm. It was like Derek Fisher, but it was like not really. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what this is, except like on steroids.
Well, Jody Meeks had one very good year, 40%, about 5 threes per game, which is a lot. No,
Jody
10
Meeks,
years ago.
That's a good name. I'd forgotten about Jody Meeks.
Jason Capono had been a laser every year of his career except the one year he was with the Lakers. Troy Murphy. Sasha was really only a good shooter one season with the Lakers. He more looked the part.
Yeah.
Brian Cook he was not a good enough player, but did, to be fair, shoot pretty well from behind the arc.
But again, you never ran Brian Cook off multiple back screens to get him a 3-pointer.
Well, he was too slow.
Right.
And then bring it all back to Glenn Rice. Here's what is, again, so ironic, because I always bring this up with Glenn Rice. Laker fans did not like Glenn Rice, in large part because he was the guy that they moved Eddie Jones for, and they loved Eddie Jones. And as much as Glenn Rice was considered a laser, not someone you could ignore, he shot below his standards as a Laker. And ironically, his 3-point percentage as a Laker was slightly worse than Eddie Jones's as a Laker, and at lower volume. In fact, their numbers overall were very similar, which again speaks to why fans didn't like Glenn Rice. It also didn't help that Phil Jackson and Glenn Rice didn't get along, and Phil Jackson and Glenn Rice's wife did not get along. Like, that whole thing just didn't. They got a ring, 2000 championship, but
They might have gotten it anyway. Locked on Lakers on YouTube.
Moral of the story: should have kept Eddie Jones.
Right. Locked on Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 26,000 subscribers, all of whom are racking their brains and going like, you know what, Jody Meeks, that's not a bad pull. We will be back after the Orlando game. We'll see everyone tomorrow.